NATO war has begun. Shaheds devastate Rzeszów, Poland in panic, Washington silent. Imagine a night that split Europe into before and after. It is officially confirmed. On the night of September 10th, hundreds of Shahed drones broke through the Polish border and struck NATO's strategic hub in Rzeszów. Unbelievable but true. For the first time in decades, Polish sirens wailed not during exercises but in real combat. People ran through the streets, pulling children out of their beds, searching for underground shelters. What had seemed like a Ukrainian reality yesterday suddenly engulfed Warsaw, Lublin, and Rzeszów. But what if this is only the beginning? In the corridors of power, they already whisper. The Kremlin has made a move that flips the board. All eyes now turn to Kaliningrad. Russia declares, "We will break through there at any cost." Troops are massing at the borders. Eyewitnesses report roads being hastily built toward Riga. Military analysts speak of a possible rapid advance. That's why the night of September 10th is already being called a turning point. What experts had warned about has become reality. The conflict has spilled beyond Ukraine and struck a NATO member for the first time. The world once again balances on the edge of a great war. According to Polish and Ukrainian media, it all began around midnight. At first, reports spoke of 5 drones. Polish F-16s took to the skies. It seemed the situation was under control, but suddenly monitoring resources reported a whole swarm of more than 120 drones was in the air. Fact remains fact. Some drones distracted defenses by veering toward Moldova, but the main mass flew straight into Poland. The world held its breath. On social media, Poles wrote, "Sirens wailing, children crying, we are now like Ukraine." The attack was precise. The main blow fell on Rzeszów, NATO's logistical heart, through which weapons flowed into Ukraine. Local media reported that the drones broke through air defenses and triggered detonations in hangars. HIMARS rockets, artillery shells, even NASAMS missiles. Eyewitnesses heard a series of explosions and saw columns of smoke. Coincidence? Hardly. It looked like a carefully calculated move. For Poland, this was a strike not only on warehouses but on the psyche. For the first time in many years, Poles heard not abstract news from neighboring Ukraine but their own sirens over their own cities. Lublin, Rzeszów, even Warsaw, the whole country plunged into chaos. People fled their homes, searched for shelters, stuffed shopping carts with water, bread, and candles. Social media exploded with messages. "We now live like Ukrainians. NATO will not save us." Official sources confirmed. The drones reached Rzeszów, the strategic center through which up to 80% of arms supplies to Ukraine passed. This was where American planes unloaded, where convoys with ammunition and equipment were formed. And here, eyewitnesses said, hangars burned where HIMARS rockets and artillery shells were stored. Fact remains fact. The blow landed at the very heart of Ukraine's supply system. What was considered a safe rear collapsed in a single night. NATO, on which Warsaw had pinned all hopes, looked confused. Polish F-16s and even Dutch F-35s circled in the sky. Romanian and Hungarian aircraft also scrambled, but they could not stop the mass flow. Here, the alliance's main vulnerability was exposed. Despite dozens of aircraft and radar systems, dozens of Shaheds still broke deep into Poland. On social media, Poles panicked. "We hear engines droning, our fighters fly overhead, but they shoot down nothing." Symbolically, it was Poland, the country that most loudly demanded weapons for Kiev and pushed allies toward escalation, that was the first to feel the backlash. Official statements sounded cautious. Brussels said, "We condemn the aggression. NATO is closely monitoring the situation." In Washington, the White House expressed concern and promised consultations with Warsaw, but not a single word about concrete action. Journalists asked uncomfortable questions. Where was NATO's air defense if the drones flew dozens of kilometers into the country? Why, even with American troops present in Rzeszów, was the attack successful? Answers boiled down to diplomatic phrases. Insiders claim that behind closed doors the panic was much greater than in public. France and Germany demanded de-escalation. Poland demanded an immediate response. The US hesitated, because open confrontation with Russia would mean an entirely different level of war. Meanwhile, martial law was declared in Warsaw. The Polish army mobilized 50,000 troops. Authorities blocked roads to Rzeszów, warning drivers, "Danger! possible detonation of warehouses. That phrase instantly deepened public panic. Coincidence? Hardly. Everything looked like a demonstration of force. The Kremlin showed that any country turning its territory into a transit base for weapons automatically becomes a target. Why Rzeszów? That question now echoes in Warsaw, Brussels, and Washington. Fact remains fact. Through this transport hub passed up to 80% of all Western weapons bound for Ukraine. American planes unloaded there, convoys of trucks with rockets, artillery, drones formed there. A strike on Rzeszów was a strike not just on a warehouse, but on the entire supply chain for Ukraine's military. The scale is staggering. In one night, NATO lost its key logistics center. And if Poland was once thought to be a safe rear, that illusion is gone. Historical parallels write themselves. For decades, Poland was seen as NATO's outpost in the east. Warsaw itself pushed allies toward escalation, demanded sanctions on Moscow, demanded more weapons for Kyiv. And now it is the first NATO country to take a real hit. Coincidence? Hardly. Insiders claim the goal was not just to destroy stockpiles, but to psychologically show Europe there is no safe rear anymore. But what if the Kremlin is deliberately testing NATO's reaction? Not only militarily, but politically. The West is cornered. On the one hand, it must show strength. On the other, direct confrontation with Russia risks catastrophe. That is why all eyes now turn to Kaliningrad. Russian military sources hint Moscow is ready to break through there at any cost. Troop movements are recorded at the borders. Eyewitnesses report roads being hastily built toward Riga. Analysts already speak of a possible rapid march. Unbelievable but true. Europe's map once again looks like a chessboard. Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, countries that recently felt secure under NATO's umbrella, now discuss scenarios in which the front line could move to their very capitals. What we're not told officially echoes in the corridors. The strikes on Rzeszów are only the first act of a bigger game. The Kremlin showed it can strike precisely and painfully, which means new blows could be even more destructive. In Polish society, shock reigns. Newspapers cautiously write, possible disruptions in Ukraine's supply chain. But people in the streets say outright, if they reached Rzeszów, they can reach Warsaw. NATO cannot cope, and Poland is alone. Brussels urgently convenes meetings, but behind closed doors admits there is no ready script for such strikes. Germany and France push for negotiations. Poland demands a tough response. The US hesitates, knowing open conflict with Russia could drag the whole world into catastrophe. This is the turning point. The conflict has spilled beyond Ukraine and directly hit NATO. And now the question is stark. Will the alliance truly defend its members, or will it limit itself to statements and resolutions? Fact remains fact. The night of September 10th was an epic failure for NATO. Poland, once called the Iron Rear of Europe, was defenseless before a massive swarm of drones. Despite dozens of F-16s and even F-35s in the air, despite all radar systems switched on, dozens of Shaheds still broke deep into the country. The strike on Rzeszów dealt damage hard to overestimate, exploding depots of ammunition, detonating HIMARS rockets, burning hangars with artillery shells, even NASAMS missiles destroyed. The scale is staggering. What was considered Kyiv's strategic reserve went up in smoke in minutes. For NATO, this looks like a cold shower. The alliance always claimed its air defense could protect any member state. But reality proved otherwise. Even with full mobilization of aircraft and technology, the alliance could not shield its key logistics hub. Dramatization? Sure. But ordinary Poles don't care about nuance. For them it's simple. NATO did not protect them. Social media is flooded. We are now like Ukraine. NATO won't make it. America abandoned us. And what if that was Moscow's real calculation? To strike not civilian neighborhoods, but strategic depots. To show this was no random raid, but a deliberate demonstration of power. What we're not told is already debated by experts. Perhaps the strikes were not only military, but psychological. Perhaps the goal was less the warehouses and more NATO's credibility. Perhaps this is just the start of a bigger plan, with Rzeszów only the first target. Insiders claim American troops were on the base during the attack, but officials stay silent. And here arises the uncomfortable question. If even the presence of US forces did not save Rzeszów, who in Europe can feel safe. In Brussels, this night is already called a point of no return. Germany and France push for talks. Poland demands a harsh response. The US tries to sit on two chairs. But one thing is clear, the alliance was not ready for a direct hit, and the Kremlin, silent. But its silence sounds louder than any statement. Russia showed it can strike precisely, strategically, and with impunity. Does this look like Moscow's success? Absolutely. Does it look like NATO's failure? Without question. But there is a third possibility. What if this is only the beginning? The attack on Rzeszów could have been a test, a probing of NATO's defenses, a measurement of Washington and Brussels' reactions. And if the alliance again limits itself to words, the next target could be even more painful. This night became a symbol of a turning point. Poland, which only yesterday felt like NATO's iron rear, suddenly found itself on the front line. Warsaw, Lublin, Rzeszów. All these cities heard sirens in reality, not drills. People bought water, candles, and food like in the first days of Ukraine's crisis. Children cried in basements, adults hid in parking garages. What once seemed like a distant war is now their daily life. Fact remains fact. The strike on Rzeszów paralyzed Ukraine's main supply artery. Explosions of HIMARS rockets, detonation of artillery shells, destruction of NASAMS components showed all of the West's plans to arm Kiev could collapse overnight. For Brussels, this was a cold shower. Emergency meetings were called, but even inside the bloc, there was no unity. Germany and France demanded caution and talks. Poland and the Baltics demanded a harsh response. The US issued only dry statements. The scale is staggering. The alliance that for decades was considered Europe's shield suddenly showed it could not defend its own supply hub. Even with every air defense system engaged, even with US troops present, the attack was successful. But what if this is only the beginning? Insiders claim the Kremlin's focus has shifted to Kaliningrad. Troop movements recorded, roads to Riga being built. Analysts seriously discuss a rapid strike scenario. If Poland faltered, who's next? Lithuania? Latvia? Maybe Germany itself? What we're not told, people already sense. NATO's umbrella no longer exists. Any country that turns itself into a transit hub for weapons automatically becomes a target. Poland has just learned this firsthand. Russia sent a strategic signal. Not only Ukraine but the entire supply chain is now in its sights. Any country could wake up to see its logistics centers turned into burning points on the map. Unbelievable but true. Brussels realized even within NATO there is no shield against pinpoint strikes. Washington saw its guarantees lose weight. And Poland, that it is no longer safe. And now the key question remains. Was this a single signal or the start of a new chapter? A chapter where not only Rzeszów but Warsaw, Berlin, Paris may be targets? A chapter where the world again teeters on the brink of a great war? The world will never be the same. And each of us must ask, who is really playing this game? And what are we still not being told?